What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Sunday, everybody. Last day of the month. We're about to start the last month of the year. I hope everybody has done okay this year. It has been a difficult one, I understand. And I just hope that whatever happens by the end of the year, it's not something that forces us to suffer in any way. Not that I know anything, I don't. I'm just looking at the state of the world right now, and it's really complicated and convoluted, and there's a lot of hate going on. There's something that I'm going to talk about related to that in a subsequent video, but I have to do this one first. I don't know if you guys remember, a few weeks ago, I reported on a clip that I saw of Dr. Dean Radin, who is the foremost authority in psi research right now. Full stop. We've been talking on email. I think he's going to be on the show probably in January, which is exciting to me because Psicoactivo is essentially and more importantly about that, about those topics. And I just want to pick his brain so much. But I was glad to see that he gave an interview to my friend James Faulk from Neon Galactic. James is actually a mainstream media journalist. He works for a company where he lives, and fun story from James. He was actually there when Missile Man and Gerb and Thembier and Kermit was also there, and Rob was also there. They weren't on the shot, but James was there with one of those really cool high grade professional cameras at the Soul event. And he was the one who recorded many of those shots from that interview. So that's a fact you probably didn't know about. He also posted the many parts of the interview because he's the one who recorded the interview. And he has many great interviews. He does some of the best introductions that I've seen on this space. His conversations with Dr. Jeffrey Kripal are really cool. He has really cool conversations as well with J. Christopher King, Kelly Chase, Daniel Elizondo, and the list goes on and on. He's spoken to a lot of people. This time he got to speak to Dr. Dean Radin, and he asked two follow-up questions to stuff that I did in the past, which I found it really cool. And I just want to talk about this because when I spoke to Dr. Julia Mossbridge, I asked her a question about this, whether there was some kind of secret, still classified remote viewing program, kind of like Stargate, or if Stargate just changed names, probably, and it's still going on. And Dr. Mossbridge responded. She told me that if there was a classified program and she was part of it, she wouldn't be able to tell me whether that was true or not. So that was the response that I got from her. But James asked a different question that gave me an answer to that question that I asked to Dr. Mossbridge. And this question was asked to Dr. Dean Radin. James's question had to do with the shady sort of alleged activity that may or may not go on related to the GATE program and potentially even MK Ultra. James asked Dr. Dean Radin about this, and here's what Dr. Dean Radin responded. But just so you know, Dr. Dean Radin was also part of the Stargate program before it closed. It closed in 95, early 95. So he was part of many of those studies. And he's been away from the classified world for a long time now. The research he does is mostly on his own and private. But he responded to this question, and I just got to show you guys because it's really exciting. So here it is, Dr. Dean Radin talking about whether there was any type of shady psi phenomena research going on still to this day or not. And the response he gave after responding to the question was a follow up to the question I made to Dr. Mossbridge. So here it is.
Well, in the Stargate program, we were somewhat aware that, at least in the Russian program, that they were not adverse to seeing whether an individual could affect another person's mind or body for health reasons or just to influence their decisions, that kind of thing. And we didn't do that. In fact, the director of our program for a long time was completely convinced that any form of psychokinetic influence did not exist. And so that wasn't part of the program at all. The only thing we were looking at was essentially clairvoyance, in its new name, remote viewing, and trying to figure out why are some people very, very talented in that domain and others are not. And we never figured out what that was. Today, with genetic methods, we have a chance to look for a possible genetic underpinning for that kind of talent, because we know that talent in virtually any other domain does have a genetic basis. I mean, you don't even need to go to genetics. You just look at the sons and daughters of great basketball players. In every other domain, that's the way it is. So it's always a combination of nature and nurture. So the nature part is the genetics. The nurture is, are you brought up in an environment that would help push that predisposition? Because if you're not, you may never know that you have that talent. So are there programs that are using nefarious means to use psychic abilities? If there are, I don't know about them. So I've been out of the classified world for a long time now, and I do know, because somebody told us about a month ago, that the government does have a remote viewing program.
Currently.
Because she told us in a public setting, and she would know, it's almost certainly not classified, because in that context, you just don't say things like that.
Did you hear? He said she would know. I think he's talking about Dr. Julia Mossbridge. And that was my bad. I failed to follow up with her, asking her if there was some sort of unclassified remote viewing program, which I know it does exist. I've been talking to a few of the students from the program who do remote viewing sessions, and it is government sanctioned. So there is a remote viewing program from the government right now that is ongoing, and there's people taking classes and learning how to do it. I know the names of some of the teachers that are still working there. It's not just Dr. Julia Mossbridge, and I think it's exciting. Kudos to James for getting this out of Dr. Dean Radin.
So that means that it's quiet, which in many ways is actually better than classified. Because in a classified system, there's all kinds of rules of what you can say and what you can't say, and you don't talk about it, except that there are millions of people who have the right classification to know what you're doing. And so if you want something to really be quiet, you have two choices. You either put it into the deep black, where only people who are read in on the project can know that it's there, or you just make it private. Just like a company will have proprietary information. Well, we have no idea what they're doing at this point, and you can't get it either. There's no Freedom of Information Act.
Exactly. So it can stay buried for long term, and there's no oversight ultimately.
Which seems to be the case with the legacy program with UFOs. Yeah.
Exactly right. And if the two are related, like has been claimed recently, I could see that there would be, complementary programs in development that, would be off book and doing things in secret. You mentioned the genetics of it, and I just had a thing that I saw on X, which I wanted to ask you about. It claims that you have discovered the genetic root of psychic ability, and I wanted to ask you how. I mean, I'm not if that's true. I've never heard that before. But then also, how closely examined have we looked at the genes behind this sort of thing, and are we honing in any sense where we can begin to identify what that genetic mechanism might be?
Do you remember who wrote that on X?
It wasn't somebody who wrote it on X. It was a clip that I saw from an account named Ruby. It is actually this clip, and I did a video about it from an interview from 4 years ago that Dr. Dean Radin said. And it's not exactly that they found the genetic makeup. The thing that he said about the Holy Inquisition was what I thought was the most interesting. But what Dr. Dean Radin is about to say right now didn't shock me, but it is surprising to a certain extent because, of course, the leading geneticist in the UFO world, of course, he at least suggested some of this to happen. So Let me refresh your memory a little bit with the clip because I got to
And so
show
we have
you.
identified a genetic sequence on chromosome 7 of DNA, which was the opposite of what we thought originally. We originally thought there's some special gene that makes people psychic superstars, and we'll find what that is. And so we got people who are psychic from psychic families and controls who are not psychic from non-psychic families, and did a standard case control study, which is what you do with genetics. So we found this difference between the two, but the difference was that it looks like most people who are quote average, normal average people, they have capacity for psychic ability. It's these other people, still a pretty large proportion of the population, we think, maybe 40%, we don't know exactly, who don't have this particular gene. And by not having it, their capacity for having these kinds of experiences is much, much lower than the average person. So this is kind of backwards, because we're basically saying it looks like everyone can have these experiences except this group of maybe 40% who end up being extremely skeptical because it's not part of their experience and they don't know how to make it part of their experience. And so one of the people working with us is a specialist in sociogenetics, which was a discipline I didn't even know existed until he started working with us. And what it's about is looking at the genes of a population and how that orients a population towards certain kinds of beliefs and certain predilections. So he did this analysis and found a very strong correlation between and this is a negative correlation. We were originally saying, well, maybe the Druids have, that portion of Northern Scotland or Ireland, maybe they have more psychic ability because they have legends about such things. We found the opposite. We found a place that has a deficit of people with psychic talent. And from a socioeconomic or a socio-historical perspective, it turns out to be Christianity. So we're thinking this is Holy Roman Empire plus or minus a couple of countries over time. There's a deficit of this particular genotype, basically.
So you mean the geographic birthplace of Christianity? You don't mean Christians around the world in general?
No, it's like the birthplace, and then high density is going to be near that birthplace.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking about probably Italy, Spain, a few countries around there, which are still heavily Catholic. There's a deficit of this gene, of this sequence. And so in thinking about that, we were trying to figure out, to get rid of a gene in a population, first of all, takes many generations, but also something has to happen. I mean, evolution does things because there's a need. The need could be that the environment changes, or it could be endless wars. It could be all kinds of things. In this case, all we could come up with as a speculation is the Inquisition.
Yeah, I was going to say that people were persecuted for displaying anything like this. They were accused of witchcraft and so on.
And so those genes were not passed along.
Interesting.
So that this is the speculation at this point, except that the correlation is pretty strong.
Yeah. And now we know, based on this question that James asked Dr. Dean Radin, where the idea may have originated from to do this study. So here it is.
Don't. It was a video quote, and it was just something that I saw on my scroll, and I'm like, I'm going to talk to him. I should mention that to him.
Well, okay, so we do at the Institute.
They called it Gene 7 or something like that, or yeah, I don't know. It was weird.
Well, okay, we have a program we call Psi Genes at our institute, and this is interestingly. You know that Gary Nolan from Stanford is one of the main figures in the whole thing, UFO thing. So Gary came to our institute one day and said, wouldn't it be interesting to look at the genetics of not only psychic people, but people who have UFO contact experiences? Mm-hmm. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I'm not clear yet whether that's public information. So I won't repeat what Gary said, but it did encourage us, because we had been interested in this for a while, and encouraged us to get a grant to study people who said that they were psychic from psychic families, and then we vetted that they actually have some talent, versus people who never said they had any psychic thing happen, and no one in their family ever said it either. So we found a very small group of people, like a dozen on each side, and got their DNA and did the full genome and did a bioinformatics comparison between the two.
Wow.
And we found a difference. So when you find a difference in a very small case control study, as this is, you never know, was that a fluke? I mean, it's statistically significant, but it's too small to make any conclusion.
Yeah.
So we've just recently submitted a new analysis where we got the DNA from people who did 23andMe and Ancestry.com, those kinds of places, which you can get your genome. So we got that from about 100 people, and they all filled out a questionnaire on different kinds of experiences that they had. And so now we're looking at the correlation between the various SNPs, the little pieces or sequences of the genome, versus how they responded to these various questions on what kind of experiences you had. And again, we find that there are some SNPs, little sequences, that are related to different psychic abilities.
The same ones as before.
No, different ones. This is why we need $10 million to do this right.
Of course.
So I have frequent discussions with people who are looking at the genetics of schizophrenia, which is now pretty well established. There are genes that are passed down, and if you have it, unfortunately, likely to get schizophrenic at some point. So those require tens of thousands of cases and controls. That's how you find what those genes are. And it's not a gene. It's constellations of genes. It could be hundreds of genes. But we also know through similar studies that there are constellations of genes that end up with different kinds of intelligence. So the two categories are called crystalline and fluid, which sort of tell what we're talking about. So a crystalline intelligence is like a highly analytical person, and a fluid intelligence is someone who's very creative. And sometimes they don't know a lot. They don't necessarily overlap. So you can have people like on either end of that spectrum, and they have different sets of genes. So again, a large chunk of our personality, our predilections, food allergies, you name it, medical issues, do have a genetic basis. Some people don't like to hear that because then it sounds like we're destined to have certain problems and certain talents, and you got it or you don't. So, it doesn't give us this sense of free will and flexibility that we'd like to imagine. And that complaint does have a real basis, because there's also an epigenetic element here. So training, practice, context, what you eat, environment, all of that, it also makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So you're
you have
not
to activate
bound.
sometimes those genetic triggers, right? And that can be bad diet or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So the environment makes a big difference. Even personality and who you deal with, all of these things make a difference. Again, it's nature and nurture. So you're not locked into your genetic basis. On the other hand, if you're not probably 6'10" or above, you're not going to play professional basketball no matter what you do.
So there you have it. And something else that Dr. Dean Radin was asked by James was that if he thought there was a correlation between the UFO and psi abilities. And I see what James is trying to investigate here, because he believes that there is this correlation that people with psi abilities may have the capability to probably pilot some of these things that are not made by humans. And Dr. Dean Radin said that he didn't know if there was or there wasn't. But I found this really interesting. What do you guys think? What do you think about Dr. Dean Radin saying the quiet part out loud that there is still an ongoing remote viewing program, but it's not classified? I found that really interesting. And I feel bad for not following up with Dr. Mossbridge when I asked her. She could have said that there is, and that she maybe is part of it. And that's exciting, I think. What do you think about that? The remote viewing program is still ongoing from the government, but it's not classified. It's quiet. And what do you think about this follow-up from the genetics study they did to find psi abilities in people? Dr. Gary Nolan apparently gave the idea, apparently. And this also goes into everything that happened with John Burroughs, how Dr. Gary Nolan and Dr. Comp Kelleher went to visit him to get his DNA for the unanswerable question of whether psi abilities are in any way related to UFOs, which many of us already think they are. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. I think it was a really interesting one. I'll be reading. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, hype, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That's all you need to do in order to help us, and it is what helps us the most. So thank you. But if you want to support us in other ways, there's a few links down there you can choose from. You can also become a member on YouTube, or you can support us through KGRA. Anything you choose to do is always appreciated. So thank you. That's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive, like James Faulk from Neon Galactic. Always. Bye.